In this segment, we're going to go over how to create gradients in Adobe Animate. So I've already got my layer designated here. I'm just going to select it. And again, I'm only on the single frame. My playhead is in frame 1. There's basically two components. There's the gradient panel and the gradient transform tool. So I'm going to start though by initiating a rectangle with a fill and a stroke. So I'm going to my rectangle tool here, and I'll just draw an area up here to create a square, just freehand. I'm just going to go into my selection tool and select the whole thing by double clicking. And the way that you can access or generate a gradient is through your color panel, or that's the easiest way to get to it. So up in my color panel, you can see here I have the solid color designated to the fill, and the stroke, if I were to select it, I would have a menu for that as well. So let's just go up to the solid color, and that's where you switch it out for one of the two types of gradients, linear or radial. I'm going to save radial. I'll put that on a circle shape a little later, but let's initiate a linear gradient at this point. So it typically starts black and white, as you can see here, and as I change it over here in the panel, it will update live on the screen. So you can see down here, this is my color picker at the top. Down here is where I established the gradient, and these little markers are to establish, they're kind of like marker keyframes, if you will. They do slide back and forth, and you can see the color is designated white over here and black over here. And again, I can slide them back and forth, and you can see how it does change the bias of where that ramp is going. Okay, and they can all slide, and I could crisscross them and flip them back and forth as well. Now to change the color on them, I would click on the desired chip. I clicked on the white one, and I can come up here and change the color. So if I want to go deep red on there, you can see it taking place. When I let go, it updates on the screen. Okay. To add a color, if you look closely, my cursor has a plus sign on it when I'm just below that line, and that's how I can actually punch in a new color chip. It will take on the current color at that spot, but with that selected, I can designate a whole new color to it. So now you see I've got the green going over here. Let me change my black to blue. So I'm going to select that color chip and just go up here to my hues and change it to a blue, and I'll go with a fairly deep blue and get a very bright version of that. And if I click over here, you can see that rainbow effect. Again, if I double click that to highlight it, you can see my fill right here, and I can go back and edit it using my color palette. Okay. Now to delete one of these color chips, you simply click on it and drag it downwards like that, and boom, it's gone. Okay, so that's sort of the first phase, if you will. Let me initiate another color in here again. I'll start another new chip in the middle here, and again I'll go and make it sort of a bright green. There we go. Okay, so we've got kind of got RGB, if you will. I could add 10 of these colors in here. I can have as few as 2. So at this point, I'm going to go over and grab my gradient transform tool. It is nested over here with the free transform tool, and it's right there below it. Gradient transform tool. I click on my gradient, and it calls up these certain controls here. I'm just going to demonstrate them right now. This is the rotate, and you can see how it rotates the angle. Okay. This is the resize. I can stretch the ramp and tighten it as well. You can see right there. And I can always come back. I can click away. There it is. I click back on it with that same tool. I have access to those editing tools again. So it's basically fine-tuning, and it can get quite sophisticated, especially with the radial, as I'll show you shortly. Okay, and now this is for actually moving the whole thing. It's like a center point. So I can even sort of technically move it out of there where you don't hardly see the gradient. So it acts like a window, if you will, and I can slide that inside the window, and that's that center point. Okay, so this is for resizing the ramp, this is for rotating the ramp, and this is for repositioning the ramp as well. Okay, so I'm just going to put that on a diagonal just like that. I go back to my move tool, and of course that follows. Oh, let me undo that and double click to select the whole shape, and move that around. So that's a linear gradient applied to a fill. Let me draw a circle now. Oval tool. And I'll hold my shift key down to make it a perfect circle. And it will adopt the most current fill when you're generating your next shape, if you will. And you can see here it's adopted the linear gradient. I'm going to go in with my selection tool and click on that fill and go back over to my color palette. And I'm going to switch it out for a radial gradient. Now it will again adopt the current color scheme. But you saw how we initiated colors. These ones are a little different in appearance. They appear like a target from a center point. So the middle is this side, and the outer rim is the right side. So again, if I move these sliders around, you can see the bias changing live on the screen version. And again, if I add another color chip here maybe, and we'll go with magenta on the outside, and maybe we'll give that a little more area, like that. I can slide this as well. Okay. And there you have it, like a target. So let me click away just to give you a better view, and that's what that looks like. I'll select it again. I can always call up my color palette to make more changes, but I'm now going to go over to the gradient transform tool. Now this one again is a little more different. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. There we go. We have a rotate, which really doesn't do anything until you distort. So this is the stretch. You can see I can shrink and expand. This one will actually distort it, as you see here by the shape. So I can distort it and shrink it and kind of get a cat's eye, if you will, like that. And then if I want to rotate, it makes sense. All right, so any combination of those. And then the center point, of course. I can move it around. So you can see in here how this can get quite sophisticated. And if I make that big, you know, you can just leverage the oversize. Let me click on that again. And maybe stretch that a bit like that. Come in here. Now this little triangular slider, let me shrink this actually. It's kind of like a bias. I'll make this a little more circular and show you, and then make it bigger. Watch what happens when I grab that triangle. See how it's almost like a magnetism, and if I shrink this even more, you'll see it even better. It kind of pulls everything to the one side. Almost like a peacock feather in this case. So there's a lot of potential for illustration once you get a real handle on these gradients, especially this radial one. Okay, and again, there's my rotate. I can reposition that. We can do all kinds of interesting things with these controls. And again, that is the gradient transform tool. So in a nutshell, with these two samples, those are the fundamentals of creating gradients inside of Adobe Animate. So I am going to want you to make two examples similar to what I've done here.